shock rock legend Alice Cooper, now 77, has delivered a deeply emotional tribute to his longtime friend Ozzy Osbourne, following the heartbreaking news of the Prince of Darkness's passing. The music world is reeling, and Cooper's heartfelt reflections on their decades-long friendship are stirring fans and fellow legends alike. Hang tight, we're diving into the powerful moment that's left everyone in disbelief. Have Ozzy's songs ever made an impact on your life? If they have, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's jump into today's story. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated and support the channel. No words could truly capture the weight of that moment. After nearly 50 years of living and breathing rock and roll, he found himself quietly whispering, "This will be the last song." That single thought cut deep, not just exhausting him, but seeming to consume the final embers of his soul. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the godfather of heavy metal, and the unmistakable voice of rebellion, took his last bow to the thunderous cheers of tens of thousands. Yet behind the blinding lights and the roaring crowd, a quiet stillness settled in the feeling of a legend gently bringing his remarkable journey to an end. While countless artists still chased the spotlight, Ozzy chose instead to slip quietly into the shadows. Alice Cooper, his longtime brother-in-arms and partner through decades of chaos and glory, was just moments away from stepping on stage when the words hit like a thunderclap. "Ozzy's not well." The weight of those few words was immense, as if time itself froze in disbelief. What followed would move even the toughest hearts to tears. It was the final heartbeat of a legend, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to reverberate through every trembling chest. In that vast, breathless silence, one cry pierced the night raw, aching, and final. Then the world stood still. That night, Villa Park became more than just a stadium. It turned into hallowed ground, where music, memory, and goodbye intertwined into one timeless moment. Just over 2 weeks before his passing, Ozzy stepped back into the spotlight one last time, not as a frail patient, and certainly not as a fading star, but as a titan still ablaze with the same fire that defined his legacy. The Back to the Beginning show was more than a concert. It was his final gift to the world, a farewell wrapped in music, passion, and undying spirit. 40,000 souls gathered inside the stadium that day. Some had traveled across oceans, their hands trembling as they clutched worn vinyl records, his lyrics permanently etched into their skin. Their eyes glistened with devotion. The air was alive with energy, yet beneath it lingered a quiet weight because deep down, everyone knew this could be the final time. Ozzy was guided onto the stage, seated upon a black steel throne, a haunting symbol of strength bound with fragility. His body, marked by time, remained still, yet his spirit rose above it all, as fierce and unbroken as ever. When the lights faded, the crowd grew silent, and in that breathless instant, it felt as if the whole world paused to honor him. Behind the scenes, Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife, partner, and unwavering anchor, accomplished what once seemed impossible, reuniting Black Sabbath after 20 long years apart. With rock legends like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and Judas Priest sharing the stage, she turned a dream into reality, even convincing doctors who had once declared that Ozzy would never perform again. But love has never followed logic. Sharon knew this night was more than a concert. It was Ozzy's spirit on full display, his way of closing his story in his own unfiltered truth. Fierce, fearless, and entirely his. This wasn't a farewell tour. It was the last chapter of a legend, a legacy carved into time for generations to come. When Ozzy whispered the trembling words, "Mama, I'm coming home." His voice was rough and aged, imperfect, yet unmistakably his. The crowd erupted in pure emotion. They cried, they sang, they trembled. A haunting ache swept through the night, an invisible wave that silenced reason and left only raw feeling behind. Next came No More Tears, lifting into the air like a solemn prayer. Then Crazy Train, the timeless anthem of defiance, endurance, and gratitude. Each note echoed like a farewell, and every lyric felt like a final letter left behind for the world to remember. As fireworks burst across the night sky, Ozzy said nothing. No grand farewell, no drawn-out thank you speech, only a glance, a single tear, and a quiet nod. It was a silent salute to those who had stood beside him through 5 unforgettable decades. In that quiet moment, he said it all. "I've come home. I'm ready." And so, the Prince of Darkness took his final bow, not into silence, but into immortality. Across the crowd, lighters flickered to life, not phone screens, but real flames, as if lighting his path forward with the same fire that burned within him all his life. Backstage, Sharon Osbourne, the woman who had stood through every rise and fall, watched with tears in her eyes. Her husband hadn't faded away in a quiet hospital room, but beneath a sky alive with light, where music soared like a prayer. The show was over, yet no one moved, no one spoke. In those final sacred moments, there was only silence, a stillness so deep it felt as if the universe itself had paused to honor one of the loudest voices of our time. Ozzy's final wish had come true. He didn't slip quietly into the dark, he left in a roar, in thunder, in every ounce of sound and soul he had ever given to music. As the final cheers faded into the night, another raspy voice broke the silence. It was Alice Cooper, the man who once electrified the world with his dark, defiant presence, now standing motionless backstage. "I was on my way to the stage when I heard the news," he said, his voice trembling. "All I could think was, no way, no theatrics, no script, no grand gesture, just raw, unfiltered sorrow from one legend to another." That night, Alice stood beneath the lights as if holding the last piece of Ozzy within him. He didn't run from the grief, he turned it into strength. And when his set drew to a close, he didn't just walk off stage. Instead, he stood tall, lifted his hand, and spoke to the tearful crowd. "Everyone, join me in wishing Ozzy a good night." The entire stadium fell silent. Then, in a moment no one could plan, no one could contain, thousands of voices rose together, a thunderous, aching cry, "Ozzy! Ozzy!" There was no cue, no signal, only the pure instinct of grief breaking free, a collective voice for a man who had lived and breathed music until his very last breath. For decades, these two men walked side by side through the shadows of rock and roll, not as friends who called each other every night, not the kind who'd text to ask, "Hey, is Ozzy up yet?" Their bond ran deeper than friendship. It was a mutual respect, forged in fire, the fire of the stage, of chaos, of pure, unrelenting rock. Alice knew Sharon. He'd met Jack. He'd stood beside Ozzy in Brazil, under festival lights and thunderous cheers. They'd once shared a microphone on Hey Stupid. They didn't take vacations together or share every detail of their lives. But whenever they found themselves side by side, there was always that quiet, unspoken look. We made it. We survived. When Ozzy passed, Alice didn't reach for poetic words, because how do you describe the loss of someone who helped shape an entire genre? Someone whose voice became the heartbeat of an era defined by chaos. He sang beautifully. Alice later reflected on that final show. No strain, no act. He just did it the way he always had. Even though he'd long known this day would come, Alice was still shaken. Ozzy's spirit had always burned too fiercely, too untamed. It seemed impossible that death could ever hold it. This wasn't just tragic news. It was a shockwave that shook the very foundation of rock and roll itself. Beneath the blinding lights and the wail of guitars that sounded like voices in mourning, Alice wasn't just performing, he was grieving. He was hurting. And when he took his final bow, it wasn't for applause, it was for millions of broken hearts. No speech, no closing words. Just one name, Ozzy, followed by a thunderous roar that rolled like a storm, a reminder to the world. He wasn't just a man. He was a phenomenon, a revolution. And as the final chant of Ozzy faded into the night, Alice stood still. He didn't speak again because in that silence, in the tremor of his voice and the grief carved into his eyes, everything had already been said. "We didn't just lose a friend," he whispered. "We lost a piece of our own soul." Alice had never called Ozzy a close friend. But every time their paths crossed backstage or amid the chaos of a festival, the hug, the pat on the back, the glance, it said everything. "Great to see you, mate," Ozzy would beam, that unmistakable grin lighting up his face, and Alice would nod, a silent exchange between two survivors. "We're still here, still breathing, still ourselves." They didn't need wild parties or long conversations. Just a glance, a quiet nod, and that was enough. Between them existed a silent bond, forged by two men who had walked through fire, faced the unthinkable, and still sang as if tomorrow might never come. Now, the voice that once shook arenas around the world has fallen silent. The voice that broke through the sound barrier of a generation lives on only in memory. Ozzy is gone, but the music, the fire, the spirit, they never left, and they never will. In 1991, Hey Stupid, the title track from Alice's album of the same name, became one of the most legendary collaborations between Ozzy and Alice. Two unmistakable voices, one raspy and sharp like molten steel, the other fierce and raw like a punch to the gut. Together, they didn't just make music, they unleashed a battle cry. A roar from two men who had faced addiction, pain, a ruthless industry, and their own inner demons and survived. For fans, hearing those two voices collide was like lightning striking the same spot twice, rare, irreplaceable, unforgettable. But their bond wasn't just born in the studio. It came alive on stage in places like Brazil, where tens of thousands lost themselves in the thunder of guitars and the roar of two living legends. That moment wasn't just music, it was something greater, something alive. They didn't live the same life, but they fought on the same battlefield. At times, they even shared drummers, bassists, guitarists, swapping bandmates like trading cards in the beautiful chaos of it all. That's rock and roll wild, unpredictable, fleeting, every connection unexpected. And through it all, the only thing that truly lasts is the music. Alice remembered Sharon Osbourne as a quiet warrior, the woman who didn't just stand behind Ozzy but carried his legacy with steady strength. He remembered Jack, too, Ozzy's son, and in fleeting moments, he saw a family bound by love in the midst of chaos. Imperfect, yes, but undeniably whole. Where there was once laughter and shared stories, now there's only a deafening silence, the kind no sound can ever fill. Alice admits that even though they weren't close in the everyday sense, the loss hit like a punch to the chest, sudden, staggering, leaving no time to prepare and no air to breathe. He was a singer for life, Alice said, his voice heavy with memory. Not a singer for money, not for fame. A singer because silence hurt more than any wound, because without the music they would fade away. That was Ozzy, and that was Alice. Two wild souls who chose rock and roll over safety, who let it break them, shape them, and make them immortal. Now, one sings alone, but the song lives on, echoing louder than ever. In the moments before Alice steps into the spotlight, there's now a shadow beside him, unseen, yet unmistakably there. The echo of a friend who wasn't always near, but was always understood. A presence whose absence makes the lights feel dimmer, the music a little softer, and the cheering crowd seem to carry a quiet, unspoken ache. Their friendship never needed promises or planned reunions. It lived in a glance, in quiet respect in Ozzy's wide grin as he said, "Great to see you again," and in Alice's gentle nod, "Still alive. Still singing. Still us." Whenever they crossed paths backstage or stood side by side in the chaos of a festival, there was always a warmth between them that needed no words. "Great to see you, mate," Ozzy would say, his grin untouched by time. And Alice, calm and steady, would simply nod as if to say, "Still standing, still breathing, still us." A quiet bond between two icons, men who had walked through the fire and still found the strength to sing. But now, that voice has gone quiet. Ozzy and Alice crossed paths many times, but one of the most unforgettable moments came in 1991, when Ozzy joined Alice on the electrifying track Hey Stupid. It wasn't just another song, it was a cry from two men who had fought addiction, a brutal industry, and their own inner battles. Their voices collided in a raw, defiant anthem, the sound of survival, of refusing to surrender. Have you heard this track? Let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts on Hey Stupid or your favorite Ozzy or Alice moment that stayed with you. But the true power of this music reached far beyond melody. It was born from the unspoken bond between Ozzy and Alice, a connection not built on proximity, but on shared battles. Nowhere was this more powerful than in Brazil, where their voices soared above a sea of tens of thousands, every beat pulsing through the hearts of the crowd. That night, the stadium wasn't just a venue, it became a battlefield of passion and purpose. They may have walked different paths in life, but in that moment, they stood as one-two warriors of rock, fighting with their music for something far greater than fame. Alice looked back on the wild, unpredictable days when he and Ozzy swapped drummers, guitarists, even bassists like kids trading baseball cards in a world ruled by noise and fire. It was the raw beauty of rock and roll, chaotic, tangled, yet profoundly connected. Through it all, Alice came to understand Sharon Osbourne not just through Ozzy's words, but through the quiet strength and fierce love she gave him. Behind the blinding lights and the thunder of the crowd, there was something real, a family. Imperfect, messy at times, but bound by a kind of love only the battle-tested could ever understand. Now, as the noise fades and the lights dim, a silence remains not hollow, but heavy, almost unbearable. Though they were never close in the traditional sense, Ozzy's passing hit Alice like a punch to the heart. He was a singer for life, just like me, Alice reflected, his voice thick with memory. In that single line, everything was said, a bond not built on closeness, but on purpose, on pain, and on the music that outlived them both. A singer for life isn't driven by fame or fortune. It's someone who clings to music as a lifeline, standing tall through life's hardest hits. Through addiction, loss, betrayal, or illness, they rise, night after night, and sing as if their very survival depends on it. Ozzy was one of them. So is Alice. They chose music over safety, and in doing so, they became immortal. Now, only one is left to carry the song. In the stillness before Alice steps onto the stage, a shadow lingers beside him unseen, yet deeply felt. It's the echo of a friend seldom there, yet always understood. The kind of friend whose absence dims the lights, softens the strings, and leaves the crowd feeling just a little more hollow. But their bond was never built on constancy, it was forged in truth. In battles fought, in glances shared, in the raw, wordless moments only survivors know. Only those who've lived through the storm truly understand what it means to keep standing, to scream into the silence. Now, Alice doesn't scream for himself alone, he screams for Ozzy too. Because some voices don't fade with time. They blaze, they burn, they leave their mark on the soul of music. Ozzy Osbourne was one of those voices, a fire that never went out. Talking about Ozzy's legacy isn't just recounting achievements, it's stepping into a storm of rebellion, resilience, and raw sound. His story didn't begin under the spotlight. It began on the gray streets of Aston, Birmingham, a working-class town where survival mattered more than dreams. Born on the 3rd of December 1948, John Michael Osbourne was the 4th child in a struggling family. He grew up to the grind of factories, the bite of poverty, and the weight of a world that offered little mercy. Yet even in that hardship, something wild stirred within him. Music wasn't a polished escape, it was rough, unfiltered, a scream demanding to be heard in a world that refused to listen.